Hi guys, and thanks for tuning back in. The Beetle is now painted and polished. That's quite a big job, but now what's left is lots of little jobs. And one of the things I wouldn't mind getting onto today is finishing this dashboard off. I still need to give it a flat and a polish, but after that I can then go ahead and start fitting the bits and bobs and all that junk back into the dash area. And another thing I need to start thinking about is getting this body back onto the floor pan. And here's the floor pan. We haven't seen this for a little while. It's looking a bit dusty. I have fitted the rear drums back on, no brake shoes or anything like that, just so I can pop these rear wheels on. And what I've also done is strip down the front hub assemblies, just so I can get to the front wheel spindles and the backing plates. And I've cleaned them and I've inspected them, given them a coat of paint, so they're ready to be refitted. And these wheel spindles are looking pretty good. The threads are not damaged here, and the surface where the bearing runs is looking very clean. There's no score marks. If you do find lots of damage at these points, it's best to replace them. And if you are thinking about lowering your Beetle, there's a cool product you can buy, and it's a dropped spindle. It's pretty much exactly the same as this spindle assembly, but where the axle comes out, this is actually about 2.5 inches higher than standard. So installing a set of drop spindles will lower your Beetle 2.5 inches on the front. And also, if you do decide to go for drop spindles, it doesn't actually affect the shock absorber. You won't have to buy any shortened shock absorbers. The ride itself is pretty much the same. But if you do have tall tyres, just be wary, they may scrub the arches. And what I've also done is just given the track rod arms a quick coat of paint. The bushes here and the ball joints are in pretty good condition. I do have a couple of split boots on this one here, which will need replacing at some point, but other than that, those are ready to go. Also, I've got new front shock absorbers. I did buy a separate kit, which is a dust cover and top mount kit as well. Better replace those all in one hit. And also at the front here, what I've done is just loosely bolted on the steering box. What I need to do is just make this chassis rollable, so I can get it underneath the car, lower the body onto it and get it bolted down. And at the back here, I've just refitted the brake pipes. They're in pretty good condition. I've just given them a coat of paint just to keep them protected. This back one here is a little bit tricky. It does have a clip. If you imagine the body being on there, it's actually quite difficult to fit this pipe. So if you are replacing the pipes at this point, now's a good time to replace these ones. So the other day I placed an order with Flat 4 for some bits to start refitting this car, and it's already turned up. And here's what we've got. We've got a body to chassis seal. We've also got some black wing beading. I've got 2 gaskets here for the rear lamps. I've got a deck lid seal here. I've got some door handle seals. I thought I'd order those even though I don't need them quite yet. And a rear number plate lamp seal. So another thing I've done ahead of time is cleaning up the hardware that I need to bolt the body back onto the chassis. These are all the bolts here, and also the special washers that sit underneath the pan. So what I did with these is overnight I just dropped all of this stuff into some thinners, and all the under seal and everything else like that, I've just cleaned it off with a wire brush. I'm actually going to coat these with a little bit of silver zinc spray just to give them that bit of extra protection. But all these parts are available. You can buy a new hardware kit if you need to at this point. And all these parts are available in a zinc plating or stainless. But one thing that's worth mentioning, the stainless kits I've used in the past, these parts here just look like a rolled washer. They don't have that thickness to it. So after you've bolted your spindles back on, just make sure you can actually move it by hand. If these are too tight on the ball joints on both sides, you'll find that the steering will become very tight, so that's pretty important. Also at the front here, there's a tiny little notch there's a cutout there on the front of this camber nut. This faces forwards, so that's 90 degrees to this spindle. So that's the stub axles fitted on both sides, and also the brake backing discs there. I've also bolted on the front shock absorbers and loosely fitted the steering gear. And what I'm going to have to do at this point, just to get the chassis rolling, is refit these moody looking front disc brakes the same way that I've refitted the moody rear drum brakes. So the next thing I need to do is install a new floor pan seal. This is the seal that sits in between the pan here and the body sits on top, and it just gets squished down just to keep it a little bit more weatherproof. So originally when this car left the factory, it was fitted with a rubber seal just like this one. But for later Beetles you can buy a foam kit, about 1.5 inches foam with a self-adhesive backing that you just stick on the pan area, and that pretty much does the same job. I don't know which is best. In my mind, I think a rubber seal could be better. So these rubber seals are available in quite a long length, and they do need to be trimmed, but not only that, you need to cut the holes through the rubber to allow the bolts to go through underneath to bolt to the body. And originally when this car left the factory, had the rubber seal like this, and then what they did is they put tacks in and beat them through the pan just to hold it into place. But not only that, this car had sealant on both sides of this seal. So personally, I'm not a great fan of putting tacks in to hold this rubber down. What I've done in the past is use a glue like Evo Stick. I believe this is like Evo Stick. I have no idea. It's a rubber glue, so I'll be using this one here. And all I'm going to do is put the seal on there, bond it on with the glue, cut the holes as I go. So pretty easy stuff. What you can do is just use a sharp blade and cut out perhaps little squares just where the bolt holes are. I mean, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to line the seal up on the pan, and I'm just going to poke it through with my spiky tool, and then I'm just going to enlarge the holes using my die grinder. I mean, of course you can use a drill to make these holes in the rubber. That will work fine as well. But one thing you need to realize is that these holes are M8, so you can't really go any smaller than that. Otherwise you'll struggle to put the bolts in from the other side. So if you do decide to use a glue like Evo Stick or a contact adhesive like the one I'm using, and you put some glue on the pan and on the rubber seal, just make sure that they flash off so they're tacky, and then that way when you put them together they'll stick a lot stronger. So there you go, that's the new pan seal glued on. Pretty simple stuff really, but if you do want to go a little bit extra, what you can do, areas like here where you have the joins in the seal, like this one here as well, what you can do is you can actually apply a little bit of sealant, something like a Bond and Seal or a Sikaflex. So I guess my auntie and her family were getting a bit tired of seeing me wearing my dirty clothes and have actually sent me some overalls, so thank you very much. The next thing we need to do is attack the dashboard. So the dash at this point is looking pretty good. I just need to wet flat it, give it a quick buff up, and then I can start thinking about fitting some of these components back in. So that's the dashboard done. What I've done is I've wet flatted it with some 3000 grit wet dry paper, and then I've just gone over it with the little mini polisher. And using the same technique, I need to do the dashboard grills there, the cover for the ashtray, and also the glove box lid. So the dash is come together quite nicely at this point. I have just fitted the fuel gauge and the speedo. I've just given those a wipe with a damp cloth. I haven't used any harsh chemicals or anything like that. So this is pretty interesting. This part here where this grill sits is actually for a speaker, and luckily enough, factory fitted was a stereo, and behind here sits a speaker bracket. So I'm going to go ahead, fit the bracket and the speaker before I fit this grill. I'm not entirely sure if any of this works, but it is a nice thing to have. And another thing I've done is I've just lightly aerosoled these grills that sit behind, well, the dash grills. This one here and this one behind the fuel gauge. And the final painted piece of the dashboard is the ashtray. I've just put a bit of zinc spray in there because it did look a bit rusty. And while I'm at the front of the car, it's a good opportunity to get that VIN plate riveted back on. Not only that though, is the Yanase badge that's sat down here. It's a pretty nice thing to have. It's a little bit beaten, but I've just put some self-adhesive tape on the back there and I'm just going to stick it back into its original position. So what I'd like to look at next is soundproofing the inside of the front doors and the rear quarter panels. And I'll be using this. It's just a generic soundproofing material. I bought it online and it's the same stuff that I used on the floor pan. So originally Volkswagen did put soundproofing in the doors and the rear quarters. There is a rectangular strip here and there was also a longer piece that ran along here. And on the original Volkswagen soundproofing, they used to cut holes and slots into them. I'm guessing it's just to allow the air to escape when they're applying it. So what I've done is I've cut the sheets to the kind of length that I needed to. The front doors are actually slightly longer than standard and possibly a little bit higher. And then what I've done is just use the hole cutter and I've just gone through the material. To be honest, drilling holes in there probably isn't going to do much for the performance of anything, but it's a cool thing to have. So that's the soundproofing in the doors and the rear quarters installed. No real dramas, to be honest, but if you are thinking of installing soundproofing, get this done first before applying any sort of cavity wax inside your doors during the refit. And this sticky soundproofing has other uses as well. If you have stripped your dashboard back and you took the grills out, you'll notice that the tags that bend over for the grills have like a black mastic on, and you can actually use the sticky stuff from soundproofing and just blob it on there if you want that OE look. So I really do feel that I've covered a lot of ground in this episode. Not only have I now got a rolling floor pan, I've also started fitting the nice little touches inside the car. Although with the pan there are still some components that need fitting or replacing, at this point in time it's pretty much ready for me to drop the body back on. So today really has been a bit of a mixed bag, but still I got some stuff done on the Beetle, so I'm pretty chuffed. If you do like this kind of thing, make sure you like and subscribe, and also leave a comment. So I'm going to leave it there for today. Hopefully we can maybe think about getting the body back on in the next episode. But until then, I'll see you guys next time. Cheers! Sorry, it's me again. There was something I forgot to mention on the painting videos, and it's how I actually masked up the door shuts, and it's something that I should have put on the other video, but I'm going to explain it now. So if you are painting the inside of your car and the exterior at 2 separate times, on a Beetle, what I do is I mask up on these clips here. So the first one gets masked back this way and the second one gets masked back that way. And at the top here, you'll notice there's no hard line. And what I do is I use a soft edge, which I'll show you what that is in a minute. And I continue that soft edge down the inside of this section of the pillar here, and then I mask a soft edge the other side. When talking about back masking or soft edging, what it is a flap of masking tape like this here that I've just folded over the edge. It then creates a flap, which means there's not going to be a hard line here if I was to paint this area here, unlike masking tape, which will leave a hard line, which is really difficult to remove after you've painted the car. And there we go, just by using a bit of aerosol paint, you can see that there's quite a sharp line on the one where I've just masked it straight down. And as you can appreciate, the build-up of paint here is going to create a step. And if you've got two paints here with a step in the middle, it's going to be difficult to blend this area together. Whereas on this side, it's like a feathered edge. There won't be a step. So I do hope that made some kind of sense. Sometimes I know what I want to say, it just doesn't come out. But yeah, that's how I've done the door shuts on the Beetle, so I didn't have any hard lines or anything like that, and it was pretty much seamless between the inside and the exterior. And what was left is just something that I just needed to flat off ever so slightly and just polish it in. You can go now.